Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to day 33 of our Bhakti Vaibhava seminar on Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd Canto. Yes, we just finished the 11th chapter. Now we're going to start the 12th chapter. First of all, though, let us begin with our prayers. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastya Chadeshatarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakalpatarubhyas cha kripa sindubhya eva cha, patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Here we are, devotees. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 12, Creation of the Kumars and Others. Yes, okay, so it's a bigger chapter, 57 verses altogether. That's quite a bit, actually. Anyway, we have divided it into 7 sections. First section, from verse 1 to verse 3, Maitreya discusses the creation of Brahma. Verse 1 to verse 3, Maitreya discusses the creation of Brahma. And I'm sure you've noticed by now that generally, oftentimes, but I think it's almost every time, each chapter begins with 3 verses, sometimes 4, occasionally 2. I think 3 is more common, just very introductory to the particular, the chapter, whatever's going to be discussed in the chapter. And this is the case here. Verse 1 to verse 3. Maitreya discusses the creation of Brahma. So then, second section from verse 4 to verse 6, the appearance of the Kumars. Verse 4 to verse 6, the appearance of the Kumars. Third section, verse 7 to verse 20, the appearance of Rudra. Verse 7 to verse 20, the appearance of Rudra. And then the fourth section, verse 21 to verse 27, others make their appearances. 21 to 27, others make their appearances. Then the fifth section, verse 28 to verse 33, Brahma attracted to his daughter. Hare Krishna, that is a bit of an extraordinary section there. Anyway, there it is. Verse 28 to verse 33, Brahma attracted to his daughter. Then the sixth section, verse 34 to verse 48, Brahma establishes Vedic knowledge. 34 to 48, Brahma establishes Vedic knowledge. And finally, the seventh section, verse 49 to verse 57, the appearance of Swayambhuva Manu and Shatarupa. Shatarupa becomes his wife. So yes, verse 49 to verse 57, the appearance of Swayambhuva Manu and Shatarupa. So there you go, devotees, 7 sections, 57 verses, chapter titled Creation of the Kumars and Others. Right, so let's just get straight into it. First section, verse 1 to verse 3, Maitreya discusses the creation of Brahma. Right, so we will just go straight through this. You know, we normally, when there's sort of a regular number of verses, and not just like in this case 3, and even one of these verses here in this section doesn't even have a purport. Normally, as you know, we will read the verses alone and then come back and read them again with their purports. But here there's only 3 verses, and one of them doesn't even have a purport, so we'll just go straight through. Right, so verse 1, Sri Maitreya said, O learned Vidura, so far I have explained to you the glories of the form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his feature of Kala. Now you can hear from me about the creation of Brahma, the reservoir of all Vedic knowledge. Okay, that's verse 1. There's no purport. So verse 2, Brahma first created the nescient engagements like self-deception, the sense of death, anger after frustration, the sense of false ownership, and the illusory bodily conception or forgetfulness of one's real identity. The illusory bodily conception, forgetfulness of one's real identity, these are the same things. We forget our real identity, and that's just replaced with an illusory material bodily conception of who we think we are or would like to think we are, something like that. All right, so there is a purport here. Let's have a look at this purport. So Srila Prabhupada makes the point that Lord Brahma, before creating the actual living entities, means in the different species, Lord Brahma created the creations under which they will have to live once they're created. Not just to create them and where they're going to go, how they're going to live, what are the circumstances going to be like. Brahma will, he creates the conditions of material existence first. So, right, the conditions under which they're going to have to live. So Srila Prabhupada goes on, and he's really focusing on this point about being forgetful of one's real identity and then being given a false identity, which, if one is in a mood of enjoying independently from the Lord, that sort of illusory identity is going to be more acceptable to the conditioned soul rather than their real identity, because real identity means what? It means I'm the eternal servant of Krishna. And that's just once they become conditioned souls, they fall down into material consciousness and material life. That's what they're into. So, right. So Prabhupada makes the point that unless the living entity forgets his real nature, how can he live in material life? He won't be able to. So the first thing is to forget who he really is. He's a devotee. Forget he's a devotee. What sort of devotee he is in the kingdom of God. Forget all of that. And then the replacement false identity will be given. Right. So anyway, but one of the first results of that, of forgetting your real nature, is that naturally you become afraid of death, because forgetting your real nature means you forget you're a servant of Krishna, of course, we mentioned, but it means forgetting that you're an eternal living entity. Yeah, because that's part of your real nature. So then it becomes natural to become afraid of death, even though by nature we're deathless, we're birthless, we're eternal. So then the conditioned soul starts developing a sense of false ownership of things which are offered to us by the arrangements of the Lord, by the agencies of the Lord. Different material facilities are there. If one is in one's real position in Krishna consciousness with a mood of just pure service to the Lord, then whatever things one is surrounded with, one will immediately feel, oh yes, let me just engage them in the Lord's service. But now the living entity is thinking, I'm an independent person. Yeah, I'm nobody's servant. So then, surrounded by different things, they spontaneously think, these things are for me. That sense of false ownership manifests. So, of course, the point there is that, and this is there from the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, verse 10, in the beginning of creation, the Lord of all creatures sent forth generations of men and demigods, along with sacrifices for Vishnu. All sorts of facilities, all sorts of different items which can be used and are intended, meant to be used for the pleasure of the Supreme Lord, to be sacrificed for his pleasure. So all these resources are offered, and if they're accepted in that spirit of service to the Lord, then they're such nice facilities for creating a peaceful life and for developing reawakening self-realization. So Prabhupada makes the point, it's about 2/3 to 3/4 of the way down through the purport. Prabhupada says, it is evident from this verse that Brahma himself is a creation of the Supreme Lord, and the 5 kinds of nescience which condition the living entities in material existence are creations of Brahma. Right. So the verse, of course, it spoke about those 5, the 5 kinds of nescience. Let me just look at the verse again. Self-deception, sense of death, anger after frustration, sense of false ownership, and illusory bodily conception. These are the 5 classic nesciences, ignorances. So, and Prabhupada makes a very important point. So we can't think the living entities are equal with the Lord. When we understand that they are conditioned souls under the influence of Brahma's magic wand. Prabhupada, as always, puts things very nicely, very astutely. Everyone here, the conditioned souls here, they are as if under magical spells. Yeah, we have in history, European history, this idea of witches and wizards with wands, and they wave the wand at you and suddenly you are taken over by some magical spell, and you start doing all sorts of things you wouldn't normally do. Yeah, so the conditioned souls are all under the influence of Brahma's wand in these 5 particular ways, and particularly having an illusory conception of oneself. So, yes, and, just interesting little side point almost, that right at the end of the purport, Srila Prabhupada says that Patanjali, who's the great teacher of Hatha Yoga, or, maybe some would say Ashtanga Yoga, but particularly the Hatha Yoga, the physical exercises and breathing exercises. He came up with the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, which are still famous to this day. So Prabhupada says Patanjali also accepts that there are 5 kinds of nescience, as mentioned herein. Right, so same 5 kinds of nescience. Right, so on we go, and it's now verse 3, the last verse in this initial little section where we're focusing on Maitreya discussing the creation of Brahma. Okay, so here we go, verse 3. Seeing such a misleading creation as a sinful task, Brahma did not feel much pleasure in his activity, and therefore he purified himself by meditation on the personality of Godhead. Then he began another term of creation. It's not exactly mentioned in the purport exactly, but the thing is here, what's happening here is that Brahma is recreating the universe. Yes, this is not the beginning of the universe, or say, the beginning of the material creation. No. There are 2 types, or 2 main types of annihilations of the cosmic creation. The first type is that at the end of every single day of Lord Brahma, just as Lord Brahma's night is beginning, the whole, or not the whole, but a substantial part of the universe is destroyed. All the 3 planetary systems, other than the very highest, So Bhur Swa, Swa. The lower planets, it means hellish planets and planets like that, Bhur, they're destroyed. Then Bhuva means the middle planets, that's where we are right now, also known as Martya Loka, or the planets of death. And then Swa, the lower heavenly planets, not Lord Brahma's planet. So, Brahmaloka, Janaloka, Tapaloka, generally these are not destroyed at the end of every single day of Lord Brahma. They remain. But the other lower ones, including like this earth planet we're on, this universe we're in, they're all destroyed. But then when he wakes up the next morning, as he's doing right now, then he recreates. As the verse puts it, then he began another term of creation. Of course, at the end of his life, that's a different story altogether. Then the whole thing from bottom to top is totally wiped out, including Brahma's planet and Brahma himself. They all die. And the whole material creation, all the universes are destroyed, withdrawn back into the body of Mahavishnu, all the living entities, other than those who are ready to go back to Godhead, right at the time of that final dissolution. They go back to Godhead, but otherwise everyone else goes into the body of Mahavishnu. And later, much later, then another Brahma. Anyway, Mahavishnu glances over matter, then manifests the universes, and then new Lord Brahmas are put in each universe. Not the same Lord Brahma. This is the same Lord Brahma as the previous day of Brahma. Same person. He just woke up, that's all, after sleeping. But in the major, when there's the major distraction and the major creation again, new Lord Brahma. So, but anyway, okay. So, let me just read verse 3 again. Seeing such a misleading creation as a sinful task, Brahma did not feel much pleasure in his activity, and therefore he purified himself by meditation on the personality of Godhead. Then he began another term of creation. Right, so there's a fair-sized purport here, 2 paragraphs. Prabhupada says that even though Brahma is the one who's responsible for creating these different types of nescience, but he wasn't happy about it. Prabhupada says he wasn't satisfied in performing such a thankless task, but he had to do it because most of the conditioned souls wanted it to be like that. Yeah, but Lord Brahma, of course, he's on a higher level, he's great devotee, so he knows that I am creating these nesciences, means these 5 different types of material consciousness, and by doing that, I'm just trapping the conditioned souls into horrible situations full of pain. So he's not happy about that. But the thing is, The conditioned souls wanted it like that. They wanted to enjoy independently. So what could he do? He had no choice, because that's his service to the Lord. So Prabhupada refers to Bhagavad Gita 15:15. Krishna is present in everyone's heart and is helping everyone either to remember or forget. Yes. And this is not, Prabhupada raises it as a question. Why would the Lord do this? Why would he help someone to remember him and another one to forget him? Yeah, it sounds unreasonable or unfair, that sort of thing. Or there's some partiality, favoritism, something like that. But Prabhupada then goes on to clarify that actually the Lord's mercy is not exhibited in partiality towards one and enmity towards another, but rather the situation is that the living entities themselves, even though they're parts and parcels of the Lord, they have a limited independence, because we, on a limited level, we partially possess the qualities of the Lord. But the thing is that in regards to anyone who is partially independent, who has some independence, meaning independence from, say, the government, or from their employer, anyone who has some independence may sometimes misuse it due to ignorance. Some government person may sort of negotiate, he's meant to negotiate for the government, but he may make a mistake in the negotiation and give away something the government doesn't want to give away. And then the government will be angry with him and he may be fired, like this. Or in a business, the salesperson, they usually or often have some flexibility. They can negotiate. They're selling the product, and sometimes they may give a discount. They're allowed to do that to a limited degree. But if then they give too much of a discount, and now the company is losing money, that's a misuse of the independence they have to negotiate to some degree. So anyway, Prabhupada says an interesting thing here. It is what now? It's just past the halfway point. In the first paragraph of the purport, Prabhupada says that the Lord, first of all, well, it's about 2/3 of the way down, the all-merciful Lord. Okay, well, let me read the whole thing. When the living entity prefers to misuse his independence and glide down towards nescience, the all-merciful Lord first of all tries to protect him from the trap. But when the living entity persists in gliding down to hell, the Lord helps him to forget his real position. I don't know how authoritative this is, but I can just mention as a historical point of fact that when I was just a very new devotee, back in 1973, then one of our devotees who was preaching to us new boys, I was new boy then, He told us, he said that Prabhupada said. So anyway, just, understand like that. He said, this is the closest I've seen to Prabhupada actually saying it. This may be what this devotee was referring to. But he said that Prabhupada said, when the living entity first wants to leave the spiritual world, Krishna tries to convince him not to. But when the living entity is just too insistent, then the Lord says, all right, and then helps him to forget his real position. So that's more or less what's being said here. That when the living entity first tries to become independent, the Lord first of all tries to protect him from the trap. And we assume that's by trying to convince him. So otherwise, but if the living entity is too much into it, the Lord sort of lets him go and helps him get absorbed in illusory material life. So Prabhupada concludes the paragraph by saying, the Lord helps him glide to the lowest point, just so he can see if he's happy by misusing his independence. Okay, and the second paragraph. So, talking about this material world, Prabhupada makes the point that almost all the living entities here are misusing their independence. Almost all the conditioned souls who are rotting in the material world are misusing their independence. So for them, the 5 kinds of nescience are imposed upon them, just pushed onto their heads. And then they accept those 5 nescient states of consciousness. However, of course, Lord Brahma is not in that category. He is an obedient servant of the Lord. Yes. So he does these things, creates these things, because it's his duty. He has to do it. But because he's a devotee, he doesn't like to see it, that these living entities, they're actually ultimately pure spirit souls, eternal servants of the Lord. But now suddenly they're just going down the drain of material life. Just really, by their own foolishness, being placed in terrible suffering situations. So, yeah, but those who are falling down, the conditioned souls, they don't care for the path of realization, because they're already possessed by those nesciences. So they get full facility from the Lord to execute their proclivities to the fullest extent, their devious tendencies. Yeah. And Brahma helps in that procedure without fail, because it's his duty, he has no choice. All right, so now we go on to the second section from verse 4 to verse 6, and that's titled The Appearance of the Kumars. Let's just have a quick look here. I think what I'll do is it's 3 verses again, but they've all got purports. I think just so we get off to a good start, I'll read the verses 4, 5, and 6, and then we'll come back just in a couple of minutes and go through the verses again, but with the purports. So verse 4, in the beginning, Brahma created 4 great sages named Sanaka, Sananda, Sanatana, and Sanat Kumar. All of them were unwilling to adopt materialistic activities because they were highly elevated due to their semens flowing upwards. Interesting. Verse 5, Brahma spoke to his sons after generating them. My dear sons, he said, now generate progeny. But due to their being attached to Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they aimed at liberation, and therefore they expressed their unwillingness. Wow, that's pretty heavy, isn't it? They refused. We will not do it. We will not generate progeny. We will cultivate our spiritual lives. So verse 6, on the refusal of the sons to obey the order of their father, there was much anger generated in the mind of Brahma, which he tried to control and not express. Interesting. Okay, so let's go through these verses again. You get the idea what's going on. And let's look at them with their purports. Verse 4. In the beginning, Brahma created 4 great sages named Sanaka, Sananda, Sanatana, and Sanat Kumar. All of them were unwilling to adopt materialistic activities because they were highly elevated due to their semens flowing upwards. Prabhupada expresses in the purport, because Brahma was dissatisfied by creating the 5 types of nescience, he then created 4 principles of knowledge. So this is more satisfying for him. So they are Sankhya, empirical philosophy, the philosophy for the analytical study of material conditions. Sankhya. Sankhya means basically to analyze. Then number 2 was yoga, or mysticism for liberation of the pure soul from material bondage. Yeah, we're just taking straight from Prabhupada's purport. Yeah, so okay, let's carry on like that. Sankhya generally leads more to impersonalism. Yoga, mystic yoga, leads more to supersoul realization. Then the 3rd category, Vairagya, means renunciation. Vairagya, the acceptance of complete detachment from material enjoyment in life to elevate oneself to the highest spiritual understanding. And then number 4, tapas, means austerity. Vairagya means renunciation. Tapas means austerity. So, they are not unrelated, but still they are 2 separate things, really, when you get down to it. So tapas, or the various kinds of voluntary austerities performed for spiritual perfection. So then devotees, what Prabhupada explains next in the purport, very, very important thing. Lord Brahma created the Kumars to entrust them with these 4 principles. But, of course, he didn't expect that they might accept those things, 4 principles of knowledge. He didn't expect that they might accept those things, but not accept becoming householders. So that was, that was an upsetting situation, Lord Brahma. So then the Kumars, they started their own sampradaya, the Kumar sampradaya, which is known more recently as the Nimbaka sampradaya, for the advancement of Bhakti, of course. So Srila Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, all of these great sages became great devotees, for without devotional service to the personality of Godhead, one cannot achieve success in any activity of spiritual value. All right, so let's go on. Verse 5. Brahma spoke to his sons after generating them, 4 Kumars. My dear sons, he said, now generate progeny. But due to their being attached to Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they aimed at liberation, and therefore they expressed their unwillingness. Wow, just see. So we have purport here. Srila Prabhupada explains that they declined the order of Lord Brahma. And, by Vedic standards, that's pretty serious. Of course, their idea, which is an excellent idea, is that if you really want to get out of material life, material entanglement, then don't get entangled in family life. That was their idea. So then Prabhupada raises the question, how could the 4 Kumars refuse the orders of Lord Brahma? He is their father, and of course, by Vedic standards, the father, and obviously particularly if he's a devotee, but even just in a general sense, the father is the authority. You can't just tell your father, if he instructs you, you must do this. You can't just tell him, well, listen, I'll think about it. So he's their father, plus he's the creator of the universe, so he's in an especially authoritative position. Plus, you can also say he's their spiritual master. At least you can say that. Or he could possibly be. Yeah. So anyway, the answer to the question which Prabhupada gives is that one who is Vasudeva Parayana, or seriously engaged in the devotional service of the personality of Godhead Vasudeva, need not care for any other obligation. And Srila Prabhupada, to support this, that one who's Vasudeva Parayana, seriously engaged in devotional service, doesn't need to care for any other obligation. So to support that, Srila Prabhupada quotes Bhagavatam 11.5.41, which it's there, but I'll just read it. Anyone who has completely given up all worldly relationships and has taken absolute shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, who gives us salvation and who alone is fit to be taken shelter of. So such a person is no longer a debtor or servant of anyone, including the demigods, forefathers, sages, other living entities, relatives, and members of human society. So there you go. once you take to devotional service seriously, you've got no other obligations to anyone else, only to the Lord, to be his servant. So Srila Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, thus, there was nothing wrong in the acts of the Kumars when they refused their great father's request that they become family men. Okay, on we go to verse 6. On the refusal of his sons to obey the order of their father, there was much anger generated in the mind of Brahma, which he tried to control and not express. So Lord Brahma, Prabhupada makes the point, Lord Brahma, he's in charge of the mode of passion. And so naturally there's some influence of it in his character. And one of the classic aspects of the nature of a person who is under the mode of passion is that they become angry due to frustration of their material desires. So therefore Brahma naturally became angry when his sons refused. Actually, they were right. They were correct from the Krishna conscious point of view. But Brahma, being too much absorbed in passion, couldn't stop his anger. He didn't express it. He didn't express it because he knew his sons were spiritually enlightened. So he didn't want to, have an outburst of symptoms of certain amount of degradation in front of them. So let us move on. The third section from verse 7 to verse 20 is titled The Appearance of Rudra. And of course we'll read the verses. Verse 7. Although he tried to curb his anger, it came out from between his eyebrows, and a child, mixed blue and red, was immediately generated. Verse 8. After his birth, he began to cry, "O destiny maker, teacher of the universe, kindly designate my name and place." There's no purport. Anyway, we're just reading the verses. Verse 9. The all-powerful Brahma, who was born from the lotus flower, pacified the boy with gentle words, accepting his request, and said, "Do not cry. I shall certainly do as you desire." Verse 10. Thereafter Brahma said, "O chief of the demigods, you shall be called by the name Rudra by all people, because you have so anxiously cried." Verse 11. My dear boy, I've already selected the following places for your residence: the heart, the senses, the air of life, the sky, air, the fire, the water, the earth, the sun and the moon, the sun, the moon, and austerity. These are the places for the residence of Rudra, the Lord's anger. Right? Okay, verse 12. Lord Brahma said, "My dear boy Rudra, you have 11 other names: Manu, Manu, Mahinasha, Mahan, Shiva, Ritadvaja, Ugrareta, Bhava, Kala, Vamadev, and Dritavrata. Verse 13. O Rudra, you also have 11 wives, called the Rudranis, and they're as follows: Di, Driti, Risala, Uma, Niyut, Sarpi, Ila, Ambika, Iravati, Swadha, and Diksha. 14. My dear boy, you may now accept all the names and places designated for you and your different wives. And since you are now one of the masters of the living entities, you may increase the population on a large scale. Right. This is Rudra, of course. This is not to do with the Kumars. This is Rudra. Right, okay, verse 15. The most powerful Rudra, whose bodily color was blue mixed with red, created many offspring, exactly resembling him in features, strength, and furious nature. 16. The sons and grandsons generated by Rudra were unlimited in number, and when they assembled together, they attempted to devour the entire universe. When Brahma, the father of the living entities, saw this, he became afraid of the situation. Well, yes, the Rudra and his sons and grandsons, unlimited numbers of them, they started to eat the universe. And what would that mean for Lord Brahma, his whole service and everything to be destroyed? So, verse 17, Brahma told Rudra, O best among the demigods, there's no need for you to generate living entities of this nature. They have begun to devastate everything on all sides with the fiery flames from their eyes, and they have even attacked me. Verse 18. My dear son, you had better situate yourself in penance, which is auspicious for all living entities, and which will bring all benediction upon you. By penance only shall you be able to create the universe as it was before. 19. By penance only can one even approach the personality of Godhead, who is within the heart of every living entity, and at the same time beyond the reach of all senses. Verse 20, Sri Maitreya said, thus Rudra, having been ordered by Brahma, circumambulated his father, the master of the Vedas. Addressing him with words of assent, he entered the forest to perform austere penances. Yeah. And of course, don't forget, austere penances, this is part of tapa. It's one of the 4 forms of knowledge which Lord Brahma has just created. All right, so let's go back and get into this section from verse 7 to verse 20. The appearance of Rudra. Verse 7, here we go. Although he tried to curb his anger, it came out from between his eyebrows, and a child, mixed blue and red, was immediately generated. And Prabhupada begins the purport by saying, the face of anger is the same, whether exhibited due to ignorance or knowledge. Wow, that's really quite amazing. So anyway, Brahma, Prabhupada explains, Brahma tried to curb his anger, but couldn't do it, despite being the supreme being on the material level. Yeah. So this anger then came out from between his eyebrows in its true color, which is a mixed color of blue of ignorance and red of passion. And the particular colors, blue for ignorance, red for passion, is because anger is the product of passion and ignorance. Right. Okay. So on we go with verse 8. Well, I tell you what, we'll finish here and we'll carry on tomorrow. We'll carry on tomorrow with verse 8. Hare Krishna, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.